welcome. We'll go ahead and get started here. I'll try to over on my way. My name is Cassie Tozer. I'm the Human Resources Director for the City of Bozeman, and I'll be the moderator for tonight's discussion. A couple of quick things. This is an informational session on the City of Bozeman's First Responder Levy and Fire Station 4 construction bond. I will point out that this forum is for information only and does not endorse or promote any vote for or against the upcoming levy and bond. Before we begin, I'll take a quick moment to remind you of a few things. If you're not already aware, our restrooms are at the back here and just around to the right at the entrance. If you need to leave the room for any reason, please feel free to do so. And please also be aware that the event is being recorded by KGBM and also by the City of Bozeman. We'll be posting a recording of this event on our YouTube channel for later viewing. So today, our panel members include Mayor Terry Cunningham, our interim city manager Chuck Wynn, Battalion Chief James Short, Chief Jim Holtkamp, and then we're also joined by Commissioner Douglas Fisher. So I'll hand it over to each of you to say a few words, introduce yourself.
I'm Douglas Fisher. I'm one of the newer members of the City Commission. I was appointed in November to replace Eagle Pomeroy. Before that, I spent several terms, about 8 years on the Bozeman School District Board of Trustees.
I'm Terry Cunningham. I'm currently serving as mayor. Prior to that, I was deputy mayor, and then prior to that, I served 4 years on the city commission.
Hi everybody, thanks for coming. My name is Chuck Wynn. I am the interim city manager. Prior to that, I was the assistant city manager, and prior to that, I did a 24-year career at the fire department, retiring as the fire chief.
Thanks, Chuck. Hi everybody, my name is James Short. I'm the battalion chief of support services for the fire department. I've been working there just shy of 16 years.
My name is Jim Holtkamp. I've been a police chief since 2020, and I've been with the Bozeman Police Department for about 25.5 years.
Thank you. All right, we are going to start with a brief presentation here. We've got some slides to go through, and then following the presentation, we'll have plenty of time for your questions. I will ask that you please avoid making statements and rather ask specific questions, just so that we can field as many questions as possible tonight. And I will turn it over to Mayor Cunningham to start us off.
Thanks, and really want to thank you for being here tonight. Our goal is to educate, and we appreciate every opportunity that we have to share the story of why this is on the ballot for your consideration. At the end of the day, this is the community's decision. So we can jump into the presentation. I have with me folks that have given this presentation many times and are far more articulate than I am. So I'm going to turn it over to our police chief and our battalion chief.
Perfect. Okay, so just in this presentation, we're going to talk about why we're here. We're here to answer questions. We're here to help educate our voters. We're also going to talk about what the different questions are. We're facing a bond and a mill levy. There are 2 questions. We'll kind of explain the difference of that. And then what you'll see on your ballot, we'll explain a bit of the finances tied to it, and then we'll wrap it up with hopefully lots of questions to clarify. So in 2007, the last time that the City of Bozeman passed any substantial mill levy for public safety, that was the last time either of our departments really added significant staffing. Since 2007, a few things around Bozeman have changed, as you may have noticed if you look outside or drive on our streets. That includes about 20,000 more residents in our town living as neighbors, and also 90 new miles of roadways that our fire trucks and police cars have to drive on to get to emergencies. What this slide doesn't show that we like to point out is there's also been an increase in tourism and growth in the surrounding communities of people that live or that come to Bozeman to go to restaurants, to shop, and to work. So all of those put pressures on our services and our ability to provide emergency response. So what will we see on this ballot? There's going to be 2 questions, as I mentioned just a bit ago. The first question is a bond question. It's for fire station number 4. A bond is for the building. So this question will ask voters to build a new fire station on the west end of town, kind of near the intersection of Huffine and Cottonwood, just a little bit to the northwest of there. And the mill levy is the second question. The mill levy is the mechanism that funds the firefighters and the police officers that will staff the station and go on the streets of Bozeman. This will hire 30 police officers, 22 firefighters, and 11 non-sworn staff that we would share between the 2 departments. So why a 4th fire station? Right now, our response times are starting to lag behind national standards. NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association, recommends a 6-minute response time for a fire department to be effective in its providing emergency responses and emergency services. Right now, Bozeman Fire is looking at about a 10-minute response time. So why is that 4 minutes a big deal? Well, for example, a cardiac arrest, we know that survival rates drop by about 10% every 1 minute that that person does not get help. I like to point out here that some of the first people on scene for cardiac arrest are our law enforcement officers as they're patrolling town. So having more of them on the streets and able to be first responders to these incidents greatly improves the chances of survival. The other point here is that fire doubles in size every 60 seconds. So if you think about the furnishings, the stuff that you might have put in your home nowadays, it's basically all made of plastic, which is solidified hydrocarbons, solidified gasoline. It burns hotter, it burns faster, and it spreads quickly. So that 4 minutes, if the fire is doubling, makes a significant impact on our ability to control the fire. What the fire department would do with this 4th station, first and foremost, it adds capacity. You can see on the maps on the screen behind me that there's a bit of a gap on the west end of town right now. There's no fire station there. We still provide coverage. What I'd like to point out here is, for example, if there's a call at the Galvin Valley Mall, that's going to pull a unit from Station 3 or Station 2, and that basically just moves the gap around town for the next call to come in. Building a fire station 4 in that area serves all of the city of Bozeman because it keeps units in their districts to respond to calls that are within their response times and their response zones. This also allows us, with this mill levy, to staff a quick response unit, the QRU. A quick response unit is a light-duty vehicle that would respond to the lower acuity or more minor emergencies. It's smaller and more efficient. It would staff about 2 firefighters, and it would be able to take the pressure off of the fire trucks that would go on the larger emergencies. Final point on this slide is the effective response force. So we know if we're dispatched to a structure fire, there's going to be between 17 and 20 critical tasks that need to be done within the first 10 minutes of that call. Right now, the city fire department can't muster that many people. So what happens today, that call comes in, we borrow help from our neighbors. We have mutual aid agreements, automatic aid agreements from our other neighboring fire agencies, but they're depleting their resources to protect their communities to come in and help Bozeman with its emergencies. This 4th fire station adds that capacity that Bozeman can better take care of itself.
All right, why do we need more police officers? The first thing I always like to point out is that we are not going to add 30 police officers at one time. That's not good for the department, it's not good for the community, and I doubt we could hire 30 at one time anyway. The goal for this is to hire 6 officers per year for 5 years, and that is solely to keep up with growth. What we haven't had to do in any of our educational sessions is convince people that Bozeman is growing. So this is solely to keep up with that growth. So as we continue to grow in the city, we want to continue to grow the department. The reason we need to continue growing is clearly with more people. That means more calls for service for us, more cases, more events, sometimes more confrontations, and more miles of roadway, as Chief Short pointed out. So what we're seeing right now is a change in the types of calls we're receiving. So every time the community calls us and wants us to respond to something, that generates what we call a call for service. A call for service is also generated anytime an officer proactively does something like a traffic stop. So as our population increases, more calls come in from the community. We call those reactive calls because we're reacting to a need from the community. As those increase with no additional staffing, our ability to be proactive and generate those proactive calls goes down. So if you look at our total calls for service, the number's going up slowly, not commensurate with the population. But if you look at the content of those calls for service, reactive is going up and proactive is going down. So as that happens, let's say an officer makes a traffic stop. That takes one officer about 10 minutes. So 10 minutes total of officer time. In place of that, a reactive call comes in from the community, maybe a domestic disturbance, that takes two officers 2 hours of time. So that's 4 hours of officer time. In place of that, that traffic stop doesn't get made, and we spend a lot more time on this call. So we're busier, same calls for service are up a little bit, but the content has changed. Off of those calls for service, about 10% of those generate a case where an officer has to do follow-up, some kind of investigation, they make an arrest, something substantial has occurred. A misdemeanor case, again, can take a couple hours, 2, 4, 6, 8 hours, but we're also seeing an increase in the felony cases that are occurring. And a felony can take 10 hours of officer time, 100 hours of detective's time, up to a much higher amount depending on what it is. So the calls for service are increasing and changing, the cases are changing commensurate with the population, and the felony cases are certainly increasing. So you can see the bottom right of that slide, it says from 2022 to 2023, the felony cases that we submitted for prosecution in the Gallatin County Attorney's Office increased by 29% just in that 1 year. So that's the tough news, is that as our population is increasing, our cases are going up as well. The good part is that Bozeman is still a very safe community. If you look at our crime rate is number of the bigger felonies, the assault with the weapons, the homicides, the big cases. Our crime rate is those cases per 1,000 population. So that's going up a little bit, but what really is just going up is our population and therefore all the cases. In regards to capacity, go back to the last slide. Capacity on that, you can see it says there are times when we have as few as 3 to 4 officers on duty at one time. We often ask people, how many officers do you think are in patrol right now? And we get answers from 10, 20 to 50. Well, sometimes it's down to 3 or 4. Last week, one of the presentations we gave, I looked and there were 5 officers on duty at that time. I drove about 8 blocks from my office to where the presentation was, and in that time, 2 domestic disturbances came out. So that ties up 4 of those 5 officers and leaves 1 officer for the rest of the city. Well, I knew those officers were already on other calls for service and there were more pending. So that means the lower priority calls just have to wait. And we don't want to consider a call a lower priority. In regards to capacity, I'm also asked how many officers should we have? So the fire department has a simpler metric, it's response time. How quick can they get there? For us, it's a wide variety of variables that go into what our community needs are that in turn determine how many officers we need. Our last staffing plan said that by 2021, so 4 years ago, we should have had 79 officers. As of this year, we're authorized 76. We still haven't filled some of those because they're new positions. So as of today, based on that plan, about 15 of the 30 officers we're asking for would be to get us caught up to where we should already be today. The other 15 would be to keep us caught up through the implementation of this plan and hopefully beyond that, depending on how fast Bozeman grows. I already mentioned that investigations, the felony cases simply take more time to work on, to solve, to provide appropriate service to the victim, and they're a lot more time consuming. So what would we do with the mill levy? The first thing we would do is establish a traffic unit. The main reason for this is that is the biggest issue the community sees. I hate to see it, but there's a lot of other types of crimes in the city that most people don't see on a daily basis. We have to put resources to those as well, But traffic is one that everybody sees. We get complaints about it constantly and recognize we've got to have staff dedicated to that. So I described a little bit ago all the calls that come in. That is the reason that if you see somebody run a red light at 19th and Main, and we've all seen it, and there's a patrol car sitting there, you may wonder, why didn't that patrol car stop that car? The reason is, in their beat, there may be 1, 2, 3, or 4 calls pending that they need to get to, and they simply don't have the capacity to stop that car. I can tell you it's frustrating to the officers as well, because they know about 30 people at the intersection saw that car run the red light and saw them not doing anything. So one of the things we do, like I said, is establish a dedicated traffic unit. Now that does not mean just driving around town randomly. It means focused patrols on problem areas or places we want to enhance and increase safety. We could have officers outside of the school district, so the school's more when school is in session or beginning or ending to ensure student safety. Parks, DUI patrols in the evening and at night. Major intersections where we're having increased problems. Bike and pedestrian safety. There's a wide variety of specific things that we could address that the community has told us is important to them. The next thing it would allow us to do is to investigate crimes properly. Again, right now we're having to prioritize the felonies. Our detectives do a phenomenal job with the felonies. There's a lot of misdemeanors that we just don't have the capacity to work on. If an item is stolen off of your porch, for example, there's a much different feeling in the sense of safety if an officer shows up in 10, 15 minutes, listens to you, expresses concern, looks for doorbell video in the neighborhood, follows up with you, actually tries to solve the crime. That's a much different feeling of safety than an officer calls you back 2 or 3 hours later, sounds hurried, just quick asks for all the basic information, hangs up, and you never hear from them again. And we don't want that sense of safety to slip from one to the other. Unfortunately, that's where we're headed at this point. The next thing is we would simply be able to improve our response times. For my previous example is one, but Chief Short mentioned a bit ago, when officers are out on patrol and have time to be proactive and present in the community, if a medical call comes out, they'll go to it, and we are very often the first ones there. Officers carry Narcan, AEDs, they're trained in first aid and CPR, and they can deliver a level of service until the fire department gets there. I recall many times throughout my career, as the dispatcher finished giving the call, I was already at the front door. I could be the first one there, sometimes within seconds, because I happened to be there. Right now, officers are unable to do that because they have to pass it to get to the domestic disturbance down the street. The next thing is we want to be able to have sufficient staffing to address each type of call. If someone breaks into your home in the middle of the night, you don't want one officer to respond. You'd like about 4 officers to respond, coordinate, and come from different directions to increase the chances that they actually catch the person breaking into your home. That's the level of service that we'd like to be able to provide. And the final thing we do with the mill levy is just keep Bozeman the place that keeps everybody moving here. We always remind our people that Bozeman citizens have a very high expectation of their quality of life. It's part of what has caused us all to love Bozeman, to stay here, to move here, and to be here. And we want to keep that sense of safety. Officers want to be able to solve crimes. So every time we interview for new officers, every single one says, I want to help people. If they didn't say that, I'd be a little concerned because that's at least a phrase you've got to use in your hiring. When they don't have the time or capacity to help people, it frustrates them as well because they don't feel like they're providing the service that they signed up to be able to provide. One of the main tenets of policing is not to just react to crime in your community, but to be proactive and provide a presence in your community to deter crime from occurring in the first place. And that's what we want to be able to get back to being present at the more major events, be present on the streets, be present at community events, education, partner with the community to really keep that sense of safety that people in Bozeman expect and that our residents have told us they want.
So we get to handle the hard question of how much is this going to cost? And this slide shows that what the chief said, we're not going to hire all of these officers and staff immediately. We're going to phase it in. We did get some good news, was it just last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, that a federal grant was going to pay for 12 firefighters for 3 years. So I think that's this lower line shows you the impact of that. It will reduce the tax burden should the community approve this. But it will be a rough number. These numbers are a little small to read. So we're initially thinking of the monthly cost for an average home in Bozeman, which extraordinarily is has an assessed value of $650,000. So you can I guess you could think about where your home is in that range and do some math. But the monthly cost would be $4 in the first year. It would bump up to 10 in the second year, and then by the 5th year, when we were fully staffed, it would be about $31 a month.
One of the things that the chief alluded to is the pace of hiring. One of the reasons that the pace of hiring is measured is because of the way that we hire police officers. And I wonder, Chief Belkamp, if you could just give us some rough numbers of applications versus hiring and the process that has to happen so that the community doesn't say, okay, we're just going to go like this and create new shiny police officers.
Sure. So hiring law enforcement has been a challenge for many years. It's been an increasing challenge more recently the last few years. So it is not easy to hire the quality police officers we expect. However, just like everyone else, police officers want to be in Bozeman as well, which is a good thing for us. So a few years ago, we started with about 100 to 120 applications per hiring process. And that's about 3 times a year we did that. Right now we're getting around 65 to 75 applications every process. So from that, it's about a 6-month process from the time they apply until we actually hire them and they take the oath of office. So then there's a multi-layered process, which I could go into, but it'll take a very long time, where we screen a wide variety of ways, from several interviews, physical fitness tests, written tests, scenarios, interviews with the chief, and then a substantial psych evaluation, medical evaluation, and a full background. And then after that, once we've approved them, they go to our police commission for final approval. About half of the people we're hiring right now are laterals, meaning experienced officers from other communities that are moving here. But we're very selective about the laterals we bring in. I used to think that any lateral applicant that we got would be a much easier hire than an entry-level officer, and that is simply not the case. We want to ensure we're not bringing anybody in with bad habits or bad training, someone who doesn't have a desire to serve this community, but their bigger desire is to flee the community they were serving for whatever reason. That doesn't work either. So we're extremely careful about the laterals, just as careful if not more than the entry-level officers. We don't fill the positions every time that we have authorized in each hiring process, mainly because we're only looking to take the very best people. And for us, that often means someone with very little experience, very little related experience to law enforcement, but they have the character and the qualities that we're looking for, and they're trainable, humble, and eager to serve the community, and those are the types of people we want to hire.
So now let's talk a little bit about the monthly cost in our next slide. It talks about where you can get more information. One of the things that I wanted to point out is when the commission had the conversation about this, one of the things that we were talking about was the fact that public safety is not, and we recognize this, and I'll get to this slide in a second, just police officers and firefighters, that there is a public safety component to some of the other work that we do. There's behavioral health, there's mental health. Creating a safe community is not just police and fire. We recognize that. And I just wondered, Chief, if you could talk a little bit about the coordinated response, mental health response, crisis response that we offer in our community as part of Galvin County. And then I'll get back to, I'll let you answer that question right there, which is how are we going to phase this in?
Sure. So the brief version is that we currently have 4 co-responders who are all mental health providers. 2 are on shift each day from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. They're housed in our building, and they listen to our radio channel and the county channel and other law enforcement agencies, and they also have our CAD system, so the dispatch system. They monitor the system and look for calls where it would be appropriate for them to respond. Sometimes they're able to take the call in our place. Other times, they respond with us, wait until officers deem that it's safe, because these are often very volatile situations involving weapons. Once the officer can deem it safe, they turn it over as quickly as they can to what's called Galvin Local Crisis, and they take over from there. Another part that they do is they conduct follow-up with people, certainly people from prior cases, referrals, and also calls that come in through our 988 line, which is a crisis hotline similar to 911. They take those calls and handle them directly themselves. Part of the goal is to reduce the number of calls officers need to respond to by reassigning those to more highly trained, appropriate staff. Secondarily, if they can maintain a relationship and follow up with people, ideally they can prevent them from getting into that crisis stage where it becomes more volatile for everyone involved and causes another call to 911.
We can move on to what does it mean in terms of how we're going to be staffing if this were to pass?
I can take this one from the fire department side and give you a break, Chief. So over the next 5 years, we have a similar issue in the fire department as well. We can't hire all of these firefighters and onboard them at the same time. We just simply don't have the capacity to offer that much training that's needed for an entry-level firefighter to put them through the process, to put them in the right protective gear and put them on fire trucks. Not to mention, it's going to take time if the bond passes to build and equip a fire station that would house these firefighters. So as you can see in the slide, over the course of the next 5 years, we will slowly hire in increments 6 firefighters in fiscal year 26, 8 firefighters in fiscal year 27, and on from there as we build the capacity in our department to onboard these members.
And for us, like we mentioned previously, the goal is just to add 6 officers per year for 5 years. In addition to that, between our 2 departments, there are 11 staff members. So those are simply department members that don't wear a uniform and a badge, but perform a wide variety of sometimes very specialized duties. For example, right now we have a digital forensic analyst who has a substantial amount of training just in that field. So we've identified 11 other positions between our departments that would allow us to not have to ask for even more people by assigning appropriate tasks to these appropriate staff members. And for those, you can see on the chart there, they're spread out 3, 2, 4, 1, 1 through years 1 to 5.
And that includes animal control, correct?
Correct.
Getting a lot of comments about off-leash animals, so we want to make sure
Yes.
that people understand that will be addressed should this pass.
Yes.
All right, so this is a slide, it's a money slide, and it essentially says for every dollar that a person who lives in Bozeman pays, where do those tax dollars go? You can see that local school districts, the county, the city of Bozeman, etc. And we want to make sure that people understand that when you get your bill, this is the breakdown of where those tax dollars go. So the city of Bozeman represents roughly 31% of what is on your property tax bill. That there are other organizations, other needs in our community that are paid for through your tax dollars.
Now we're quickly getting into the weeds here, but this shows kind of how this this first responder levy and fire station looks compared to existing, and will look compared to your existing city tax bill. So it's again, we'll add, if we go to the end of when we have all the officers and firefighters on non-sworn officers on staff, we're looking at an additional $35 a month. And you can see that it would, again, if all things being equal with city finances, it would bump the monthly cost from roughly $138 to $173. But I think at this point, it might be better to just open up to questions, and if folks who just hear from your questions and perspective on this, on both the bond and the levy issue.
Feel free to just raise your hand and I can come around with a microphone.
I think I know the answer to this question, but Chief Falcon, what's the obstacle to hiring new officers? Is it the housing costs?
I would say it's a wide variety of things. Law enforcement is having hiring challenges across the country. So simply the career, the expectations have increased over the years. It's much, there's broader expectations. Juries and judges, from probably watching too much television, expect everything to be solved just like on television. And we have to meet that standard. There's a lot more officers need to know. There are a lot of other ways that they can make a living as compared to being in law enforcement. So all those are challenges across the country. For here, the cost of living certainly doesn't help. Our officers are able to buy homes, but they're not necessarily in or near Bozeman. So once you put those all together, it makes it an increasing challenge.
Chief Short, you addressed this, but I'd like you to expand on it, on the issue. I live on the east side of Bozeman. Why should I vote for a fire station that's going to be on the west side of Bozeman?
Excellent question. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to further address it. So, as I mentioned before, this west side fire station serves predominantly that west side in its immediate coverage district, right? So if there's a call, I use the mall as an example. If there's a call at the mall, it can quickly and efficiently get to the mall. Today, with our 3-station layout, if there's a call at the mall, it might pull Station 2, which covers the east side district, to take that call. And then when that gap shifts to the east side. So in the fire service, we call that resiliency and reliability, to keep units in their districts to respond to their immediate districts for response. So a station in the west side would keep the east side, or Station 2, Station 1 districts in their homes ready to respond to the next call. In addition, putting a QRU in Station 2 and perhaps Station 1 as well, as we fill out this mill levy, would allow us for redundancy within those stations. So the first call can be answered by a quick response unit, and the second call in that district can still be responded to by that Station 1 or Station 2 crew. And the final point, just to kind of bring it full circle to the critical tasks, if the call is severe, a high acuity call, such as a structure fire, it's going to take all of the resources from the city to respond to that call to deal with the emergency. Right now, we're having to wait for our neighboring fire departments that are much further away, sometimes as much as 26 to 28 minutes, for them to respond and to be on scene, to start handling those critical tasks that we know need to get done in the first 10 minutes.
The other element, Patty, of your question is, well, what about impact fees? Why, we charge impact fees in high growth areas, right? One of the things that you should know about impact fees is impact fees cannot be used for personnel. So we can't hire new firefighters with impact fees. There's a proportionality component too. You should know that $1.5 million of impact fees has been slated for the purchase of the property associated with this. So impact fees, one-time fees on new development are helping to pay for some portion of this that would not be part of the levy, the bond for the construction.
Tim, question for you. How many openings do you currently have in the police department?
So we just got authorized some, this summer as of July 1, so that's part of the reason that those aren't filled. Today, I would say we have 7 openings. We just gave 5 offers last week. So assuming those all worked out, which they won't, most of the time we have at least 1 or 2 that don't make it through that process. After that, we would have 2, but I also know retirement coming up, and quite often there's someone else that ends up leaving at some point too.
So if you're not fully staffed now, I'm not quite sure how this passage of this will help you get fully staffed when you can't do it now.
So we are making progress to getting fully staffed. Like I said, we did get some positions this past year, and that is some of that capacity. So if we hadn't gotten any positions over the last couple of years, we would be full today. So it takes us a little while to get caught up, and we're trying to fill the ones that we received this past year. So if we couldn't hire the 6 officers per year, at least we would have the authority and the authorization to do that. It may take us a little ways past the implementation of the mill levy, but I believe we could still get there.
And so if it was to fail, you can still, doesn't mean hiring's cut off totally, right? If it fails, you can still hire.
Hire to fill those authorized positions up to the 76 that were authorized.
And wouldn't that number 76 grow over time as the city grows?
Not without the passage of this mill levy.
Well, it's grown so far, right, to 76. Wouldn't it just, whatever reason it grew to 76, it's going to still grow higher as time goes by?
So we ask every year, just like each other department, for what we believe is appropriate staffing. The issue is that all of that additional staffing comes out of the general fund dollars, and there's only so many general fund dollars to pay for the additional staffing. So I have to defer to the city manager and the city commission regarding how that process goes and what ends up ultimately getting authorized. So we have been asking for additional staffing to keep up with the growth for quite a few years. Unfortunately, the resources just haven't been available to do so. Or like I said, ideally we would be about 15 ahead of that today.
If I can add a little bit, thanks for the question, Paul, it's really important. I think that's what the issue is that we're hearing all over. Is the city growing? The city's growing, there's more taxpayers. Why doesn't that revenue cover the needs of the city? We have far more requests from departments for new staff than we have the resources to provide for those. So we make choices every year. The city manager makes our city manager's recommended, that's a new word, recommended budget to the city commission. And there's some hard choices that have to be made. At the risk of many other city operations, we have added public safety positions as we can afford to. What we haven't been able to do, and we had a great conversation with the city commission this year, is get back to basics, get back to our core services, make sure we're providing the services that the city needs and wants as a priority. And part of an example of that is in our HR department. We have 1 recruiter for 550 positions in the city, 1 recruiter. We have about 50 positions open right now that we're trying to fill with 1 recruiter. So in order to, a rising tide lifts all boats, in order to provide for the needs across the organization, we have had to make hard decisions about adding staff in public safety. So we're falling behind. We are, by state law, only allowed to increase taxes by 1/2 the rate of inflation on a 3-year rolling average. So without growth, without those new tax dollars, we would not even be able to afford a very minor increase in compensation for any of our employees. So it sounds like, and it looks like, when you look around Bozeman, all this new construction, we should be flush with money. But because of Montana tax law, because of inflation, it's hitting you in the pocketbooks, it's also hitting city in the pocketbooks, rising our costs of materials, operations. We have salary increases, modest ones that we have made and continue to make with our 4 unions and our non-represented employees. All of that combined together, has us kind of in the hole that we're in now. And the hole is that the needs of the city, particularly with public safety, far outstrip the resources that we have. And if you've ever made a call to 911, I sure hope you haven't, or if you've ever witnessed somebody choking at a restaurant, or you've seen a car wreck, and you make that call to 911, those seconds seem like hours. And we simply don't have the ability in our emergency services now to respond in the way that this community wants, in the way that we as professionals want to serve this community. And this is a way, the only way with the current tax structure in Montana, we have to, without making significant cuts in other areas that are as important to our residents, other general funded areas, without making severe cuts in that, we don't have the resources to add in our police and fire departments. We also have the highest, not a surprise to anybody that's ever done the construction here recently, we have the highest construction costs of any area in Montana. Maybe Whitefish is close, but we're still the highest. There's a lot of reasons for that, but that also strains our very limited resources. So we're getting back to what the community wants, and the city commission has directed us to do in terms of getting back to our core services. Public safety is one of our most important core services, and that's why we're here tonight. And that's why you have an opportunity on November 5th to vote yes or vote no.
I have a question, as both of these are certainly related, the bond and the mill levy. I was curious, first question, are they being voted on together or are they individual? And then is there capacity, if only one passes in terms of facilities for the extra staff, or vice versa? Do you have staff if only the bond passes?
Sure, thanks for that question. We have a public safety system here, and we believe in our tiered response model. Closest resource, our police and fire departments work as closely or as well together as any police and fire department I've ever seen in my 40 years in Montana government. That's something that we work hard on. So that's why the police and the fire staffing are one question. The fire station, and that's a mill levy, so that's a vote to increase the taxes forever to pay for those staff. The fire department construction is a bond, and that is, that's for the construction. It's a 20-year bond, after which time it comes off the taxes. If the bond passes and the levy doesn't, we probably won't build the station. There won't be a need for it. A very important change that we have here now that is just came as the mayor, the Commissioner Fisher mentioned earlier, is that we have this SAFER grant. And that SAFER grant will pay for 12 firefighters for 3 years. After which time, the general fund takes all of the brunt of those firefighters forever. So we have some really hard decisions to make, and the commission will make those decisions if the bond fails. So we put it together because we have a system. We need both. We'll have different conversations for sure if one passes and the other one doesn't. I don't know what we would do if the mill levy passed and the construction bond failed. That would be an interesting conversation we'd have to have. But I want to assure you that this commission and your city staff is very creative, and we have very transparent conversations about decisions that we make. And that's one of the things I really appreciate about the city is there's no dark rooms where these things are discussed. They're discussed in public. The commission, as your elected officials, make those critical decisions, and we get them all the best information and options that we can come up with.
Say that it doesn't pass. Where could or would the city look at pulling funding from other programs that they could offset to this very important topic?
So each year we pass a new budget. We're operating on a 2-year budget cycle. at the moment. And so if the levy or the bond would fail, the general fund, and that's where police, fire, library is the bulk of our funding. That's what I call the mosh pit. That is every department looking for resources. And so we would have to make some tough decisions at the next funding cycle. We'd have to decide, where do we cut? One of the things that we are constantly faced with, as the city manager mentioned, is we have a structure right now that says you as a city can only operate your budget at a 1/2 the rate of inflation over a 3-year period. And we operate in a system in which we have some of the highest construction costs in Montana. If this were a business and someone were to say, you must operate your business at 1/2 the rate of inflation, and construction inflation is the highest in your business sector, most people would say, where do I leave the keys? The other portion is growth. We do have a slide, a couple of slides that we would like to sort of talk to that kind of illustrates this. One has to do with what's the impact of 1/2 the rate of inflation over time. It doesn't seem like much. So one of the other things we point out is that bonds retire. We do have bonds that are going to be coming off the rolls. We have bonds for the Parks and Rec, the new fields, the one that brought you the Storyville Community Center, the sports fields, the expansion of Bozeman Pond Parks. Those will be coming off the rolls at a certain point because they're a bond. And so the fire station bond would be a finite period of time. Here's the slide that I was talking about, and this is the effect of inflation in blue and a cap of 1/2, the rolling average of 3 years, and then what the deficit is. And the deficit, as you can see, continues to grow, and that's in red. And essentially, that's what we're up against. We are continually facing a situation where our personnel costs are going up. Our materials costs are going up. Anyone who has purchased a vehicle, we are a purchaser of vehicles. We are a construction company, if you will, as well. We create roads and so on and so forth. All of those things are continuing to increase in terms of costs. And our cost structure is such that we are sort of penalized each year, and that compounds, as you can see in the red. There's another one that has to do with the percentage of to our general fund for growth. Okay, here's another one here. People say, I just saw my property values go up tremendously. How is it that you do not have the funds if my property values are going up to pay for these services? The blue bar, the blue graph, is each time we have a revaluation. That's the value of property taxes. The bottom is what we are allowed to increase according to the formula. So as you can see, the number of mills we increase, we are able to charge as well, are not related to this vast increase in property value. Another one, and I hope this one made the slide. There you go. This is really difficult to read, but trust me, growth, that portion which is added to our revenue associated with growth, is the top of each of those blue bars. It's sort of the silver area. So when people say, my goodness, I see apartments going up left and right, surely as a result of growth, that can pay for our revenue needs going forward. And this graph shows the portion that's added to our revenue capabilities when associated with growth. It is a relatively small amount. These are some sort of shocking numbers that sort of dispel some of the things that you may hear. But those are, we want to make sure that those facts are available for people to digest as well.
Do you anticipate the increased capacity with the mill levy to
future ordinance?
So, tomorrow night, we're gonna be, talking about, urban camping. And so there's, a proposal to repeal the current ordinance and to create, a new ordinance. Relative to, how this will impact, the response, generally speaking, the department that is most directly, having daily conversations and visits, and trying to hook up with resources, et cetera, is our neighborhood services department. And that department is separate from the police department. And I wonder, city manager, any further comments on that relationship or how those two things go together, the urban camping discussion and the discussion we're having tonight?
Sure, Mary, thanks. None of what is being asked for in the mill levy is because of urban camping. The needs of the city, without the urban camping situation, are warrant what we're asking for in the mill levy. So I think it's easy to think about that. Well, if we didn't have urban camping, we'd need less police officers. That's not the case. A significant amount of work of the police department is being generated by the urban camping for sure, but we didn't up the required number of police officers or the required number of firefighters because of the call volume of urban camping. There's other work in the city that isn't being done that needs to be done, whether we have urban camping or not. So we said it earlier at the August 6th work session we had about urban camping. Urban camping is taking a lot of time from the police department and the fire department, but it's not, we're not adding staffing to address urban camping in the middle levy. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds kind of like both, because you said by prioritizing, or maybe not being able to address other issues because it's a high call volume for urban camping. So it sounds like, yes, you kind of want more police for urban camping, but no, it's not going to be police addressing urban camping. I'm hearing.
Okay, sure. So there are several challenges with urban camping, the people that are on the street right now. Most of the, or you say most or a lot or some, there are urban campers that are causing no demands on the police department or the fire department. They're generally the ones, and we'll talk about this tomorrow night, who are working hard to get out of their current situation. They'd rather have permanent housing than be in a trailer. Then we have and so that's really no real impact on our police and fire department. We have a group of urban campers that are not like that other group. And there are mental health challenges in there. There is substance abuse challenges in there. There is crimes that are being committed amongst each other and in the communities around that draw required police presence and required medical services from the fire department. The ordinance tomorrow night is aimed at that part of our urban camping population, so that we have different tools available to address the certain challenges that those folks give us. So it's not yes, no, always, never. It's just like other parts of our community where we go where we're called, and we prioritize those calls. So urban camping is taking some of that time from the police department and that time from the fire department, and that time, if urban camping went away, would go to address the current challenges that the city has, emergency service requirements.
Thank you. We do have a few minutes left. Next time for 1 or 2 more questions.
I've got another question. Because you're spending public money, I'm curious, what's the average salary, including overtime, for a police officer and a firefighter?
I have a tough time coming up with the exact average solely because It changes based on years of experience. For a brand new officer with no experience, I believe it's about 75,000 per year, and it goes up from there. If you have right now 5 years of experience or more as a lateral, you can come in at the 5-year rate. But for all of the officers and sergeants, there's a chart depending on your rank and how many years of service, what that number is going to be. So a lateral with 5 years experience would start in about the mid-80s right now.
An average for the average officer and firefighter salary plus benefits is about $110,000 to $120,000 a year. Any other questions?
First time I can part of this. But I have a question, like when I get my tax bills, I get a city tax bill and I get a county tax bill. And I know there are lots of people living in the county that, come to the city. So are people who live in the county, are they paying more county taxes than me? Or are they just getting all of these city services basically free?
So, the county collects our property taxes, and so the bill that you get from the county would be inclusive of our general fund, our property taxes. We send out separate bills for services, for water, sewer, for garbage collection for those who are a part of that, for a tree maintenance district and arterial collectors. So that's a separate bill for services that was sent to city residents. The question of who is paying for services, if someone were to live in Delray, but they work in Bozeman, and something should happen to them in Bozeman, we're responding to that for sure. Just as if someone in Bozeman worked in Belgrade, that would be their response, or they were going to a restaurant there. We don't, and so there are services, and some people say, hey, just to stop growth in Bozeman. Even if we put a wall around Bozeman in terms of new people coming here, we're still a major employer with our hospital, with our university, etc. So people are coming here to work. We are still a tourist destination. People coming here to take advantage of all the things that are Bozeman and the area. So we recognize, and one of the things that Chief Alcamp will tell you, and Chief Short will tell you, is the number of people that they serve, that they're responsible for, exceeds the Bozeman population. Who do we police? Who do we provide fire services for? Is greater than our population because of those things. When you see traffic coming down 19th and 7th in the morning and seeing them going back, that's our workforce. And they're going to Belgrade, they're going to Livingston, they're going to Manhattan, etc. But we police them. We are responsible for their safety when they're in our community. And when they have a heart attack, we don't ask for an ID. We just go and we try to save their lives.
Thank you. Okay, we are at the end of our time here tonight. Just for the last couple of minutes, is there anything else from the panel members that you'd like to share?
Just that we appreciate you coming out and educating yourself, because obviously the ballots are coming out soon, and you're going to have to fill in some blanks. And if what you hear tonight is something you want to share with your neighbors, encourage you to do that. We are always available for follow-up questions. There's comments at bozeman.net. There's you can call us, and we're happy to take those questions as well. So I just wanted to thank you for being here tonight. This is what Bozeman's supposed to be. And we sit around, we talk, we answer questions, and we make sure that we're available. We know a lot of your names. You know our names. We're not strangers to one another. So please feel free to continue the engagement. We appreciate it.
Thank you. And yes, as the Mayor mentioned, there's plenty of information available on our website, and we always say to please come into City Hall, pop into the Safety Centre, whether that's the Police Department or the Fire Department, and talk to these folks. They'll be more than happy to answer your questions. So thank you again, everybody, for coming out. We appreciate your time, and thank you